Hello and welcome to Get Good. My name is Bruce, and as always, I'm joined by Magnus. And as in this series, we have a third face. It is not only, I can't even talk today. This is how excited I am. It is none other than Phoenix Miniature Art, otherwise known as Liam. I will probably use both names interchangeably. Liam, how you doing?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me on. Been quite excited for this, to be honest.
I am. I think it's been kind of the thing that's been simmering in the background that I've been very much looking forward to. And I know kind of based on the pre-chat that it's going to be quite interesting. I will say, if you are watching this and you're like, who is this? Who is this Liam? Who's this Phoenix fellow? There's quite a lot now. I was working through in my head like, okay, well, how do I introduce Liam? I think number one is now Golden Demon winner. That's the really exciting one after Spiel. But also get yourself to all the myriad places that Liam exists. So probably most notably Phoenix Miniature Art on Instagram. We have Phoenix Mini. Visit Phoenix Minis. I always get the URLs wrong. PhoenixMinis.co.uk.
Yep.
And / Phoenix Commissions on Patreon. I will say, if you've never watched Liam's content, you need to slap yourself in the face, because when I first started, Liam was the first teacher in video form or otherwise that I actually began to understand concepts with. That is how highly I will happily speak about this man. So check out
Same
YouTube.
for this guy.
Same for Magnus. Get yourself on that. But we're going to dive into it. We're going to dive into it now. So there's enough like, this guy's really good. Let's actually find out what his views are.
Thank you. I've got a big head now.
So Mags, you go. You were talking about the pre-chat. How do you want to start stuff?
Yeah, I have so because we have a bit of interaction outside of, well, everyone's view, back and forth, especially because I kind of use it sometimes a bit as a sounding board for things that I do, as I kind of back in the day found you when you started up and was sat in that chair and doing other kinds of projects and in a different setting and maybe even in a different mindset too. And then it kind of has slowly evolved from there until a point where I felt, from my side, comfortable enough to kind of reach out and say, hey, dude, do you want to be my friend? Not quite with those words, but kind of, right? In that sense, you kind of reach out and you feel like you need to build something. So now I'm using it as a bit of a sounding board and hey, dude, you doing okay and whatnot. So we talk a bit off screen, and especially some of the heavier things can come up because I feel like you are one of the people who actually put a lot of thought into not only like the creations, but everything around it too, which is something that is important for me because it's something where I can kind of pick a brain and say, how do you feel about these things? They are bugging me. I don't understand what is going on. Or do you feel like this sometimes? Because, right. So I use you like that also. And one of the things that we did talk about was competitions and planning things and having great ideas, huge plans, some things you want to, okay, I really want to try this out. Maybe this is not within comfort, so I want to do something to push my own level and do something. And it can kind of grow. And then at some point you find that, oh my God, I'm out of time, really. I can't make it to a deadline because it feels like in a competition sense, it feels like you have a deadline all the time. And even when you break through the first
deadline,
one,
isn't there? Yeah.
Yes. Even when you're like, okay, so I'm okay with not reaching this deadline, you have one literally the next or 2 months later. Yeah. And so you're always kind of a bit behind in the grander scheme of things. So I want to ask about how do you feel about planning projects? How does it feel to have something that you want to do personal and plan and be immersed into, and having to kind of maybe not discard it, but push it away because you need to reach a deadline, do the commission, do the videos, do the tuition, do the teaching, all of those things.
I think it's I think it's very different for everyone, but for me, like I get quite emotionally invested in a lot of my pieces. And basically what happens is we end up, there's so many points that the bubble can burst with any one project. Like, you know, it's like you go, I've got this wicked idea for a piece that I'm going to do for, let's say Golden Demon, right? And then you grab the model and you just think this model isn't, like, the first point is you build and prep the model and you go, this model is not competition worthy. Like the build, like, so straight away that can throw it out the window. And that can be positive because you don't waste a lot of time. Like within a few hours, you're going to know, no, let's move on. I've got to go to a different idea. Then there's a point where you go, right, I've got this idea. Now I need to maybe set the scene, because like if we're talking about like passion projects, which I think is a really interesting subject, but let's say I've got this idea. Now I need to build the scene. Well, all of a sudden, are my basing abilities not up to that standard? Well, all of a sudden I've got a model that might be built and prepped. I've now invested, say, 4 or 5 hours, and now maybe that's a stopping point. Maybe I've got some green stuff work that I've got to do on it. It might be nice and subtle, but maybe my skills are just not there yet. That could be another breaking point. What happens if you're 3 months? Because the thing with things like customizing a miniature, you do a small bit at a time and then you have to leave it to set. So like if you've got something which is in any way elaborate, you might be doing it for 3 months. Like when I did Maz, it took me just over 6 months to build and convert that model. Yeah. Well, if you're 3 months into something and then you go, my skills are just not able to do this part. Well, now you've lost 3 months. And this is before you even get into the painting of these things as well. So I think it's quite a daunting task. And I think, first of all, knowing how long these things is going to take, that's a new learning point for me. Like you guys have seen what the things that I'm playing with in the background, and I've just had to abandon them for Adepticon because I'm like, there's no way that I can even finish the build in time. So you just get the timings wildly wrong. And I think, at least for me, the thing that I'm learning at the moment is I have to have projects where I'm like, I'm just going to paint these. These are just fun paint jobs. That's it. And then I have these, let's say, passion projects in the background where they're done when they're done, right? Like I've got no, let's say, passion projects. Let's call them passion projects for a decade. I've got none whatsoever, because none of them are finished in time. No. Do you know what I mean? And there's also, like, at least me, right? I'm a bit of a hobby butterfly. Like if I've got a project that's going to take me 6 months, well, guess what? In that 6 months, I'm starting new projects as well. Yes, of course. Right, which makes it even worse. So there's this point where it's just the pieces in isolation have got so many points of potential failure. And I know failure is a really hard word, right, for a lot of people, and maybe it's not the right one. But at the end of the day, if you get to a point where you go, I'm not capable of doing this yet, well, you've either got to go, I'm going to live with the fact that it's not going to be perfect, or you've got to go, I'm going to park it until I am actually capable. Yeah. And I think for me, I think it's better to just pile through and go, that part's not going to be good enough. Because I think if you're always chasing that, this needs to be bang on, then you're never truly going to finish anything. And I know with Maz, there were 3 points on Maz where I was just not, the sculpt was not good enough. The conversion was not good enough. And it became a point of, how can I hide those parts as much as possible? And clearly it paid off because they didn't see them. And that's the thing, right? In the end, sometimes you kind of need to decide on just, okay, so I need to finish it. I need to present it, because otherwise I mean, well, you say it, but I had the same. Others have looked at me like I'm crazy when I said, well, there were some things that I would have changed on my Golden Demon winning entry if I could have. I couldn't at the point, and but I would today if I could have gone back, I would have. But that's for me, because clearly the ones who judged it felt the way they felt about it, right? I also think there's an element. Sorry, Bruce, do you want to say something? No, you go. I also think there's an element of, we spend so much time on these pieces, we see those flaws. The truth is, the judges don't see. No. get all of that time, they have less time to see the issues, right? So, for example, Maz has grass tufts, moss tufts stuck over the throne, right? Originally, I had this idea of painting on moss and integrating it into the sculpted moss that I'd put on, and it was such a disaster. So the truth is, like 2 days beforehand, I'm gluing moss tufts onto Maz's throne to hide it, right? And then I don't know if you guys were around when it happened, but it was Friday evening at Golden Demon. Maz is in the cabinet, and I can see dried super glue. Where
I can remember your face.
Those moss tufts, yeah, absolutely. And I was in full panic mode. I was like, that's literally cost me everything. Like, I'm out.
Yeah.
I had a whole night of just complete sleepless nights, and I was like, why don't I just go in the morning and ask to take the model out? That was it. But I was in full panic mode.
So you did do that?
Yeah, I did.
Did you not see him bringing it back to the cabinet?
No,
I didn't. No, I didn't.
I was walking through Essen. I had a guard of painters all around me, moving everyone out the way as I'm holding Maz and walking over to the Artist Opus stand. And I walked up to the stand. I looked at Byron, and he went, "Just do what you got to do." I was like, it was so funny. It was so funny.
Oh, I didn't even know. Damn.
Yeah, it was all like a last minute, just like slap some moss tufts over to try and fix the abomination of what I just could not. In my head, it was amazing, but I was not capable of it. And it was really funny. Like, I was a complete wreck when I saw that. Like, I didn't sleep. I got like an hour's sleep that night. And he just came to me at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, why did I not just ask to pull the model out of the cabinet? Like, they're not going to say no.
Yeah, you literally can. Yes.
Yeah,
they're like, no, that's ours now. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It was so funny. So I think it's a perfect example. Like, there is failures in every piece. There is parts where it's just not up to standard. But the truth is, like, not everyone sees them.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Because they don't get enough time.
I think as well, you see this idea of like the roadblocks as like project killers, or are they just like, I will push through? I see that across all levels. So many people are just like, oh, well, if I can't get this particular bit right, I shall not finish this model, as if that helps them in the long run, which I think ultimately, like, being able to say, this isn't perfect, but maybe the next time I'll come back to a project like this, I'll do it better, is a perfectly reasonable way to think. Because also there's like a mentality aspect within it, like, thanks to things like Instagram, thanks to kind of the barrage of the best possible projects being visible at all time, you're going to view your work so critically. And then most people, when they see your mini, are like, hey, this is brilliant. What are you on about? Like,
this is, and I don't want to derail, but this is such a pet hate of mine. And Mag, like, I know you're probably going to know this as well. Like, when you start teaching, you see this in other people so much. Like, I don't look at social media very much anyway, because I don't think it's particularly healthy. But like, I get students coming to me and they're genuinely great painters. And Bruce, like, you're guilty of this. We had this conversation at Golden Demon where people are like, my painting's not really that great. And actually, they're amazing painters. The problem is there is a spectrum of painters, and you have the beginners down here, and then you have the top 1% up here. And the problem is we only see the top 10%.
Yeah.
So everyone goes, oh, I'm not a great painter because I'm like in the top 10, maybe towards the bottom of the top 10%. Well, the truth is that's incredible. Yeah. That's such an incredible achievement. But because they're only seeing the top 10% of the spectrum, they're like, my work's just not good enough. And it's not true.
I think also the competitions kind of play a role here, in the sense that the level is getting higher and higher. It's getting so hard. That means even fantastic paint jobs, they kind of miss out. Because Bruce and I have talked about it before. Walking into, let's say, Golden Demon, on any day you could have 100 painters beating you, and it's not to say that you didn't bring something fantastic, but they did too, right? And someone is going to win, right? So when you kind of compress the top two, because people do get better and better every year, we see it. It's so hard to kind of like imagine that you went and you didn't really get there for a number of years. You think to yourself, well, I'm not quite good enough. Well, but you were one of the 100 good people there, right? I mean,
and I think we have such. I don't think. I love Golden Demon, always have done. right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows this about me, but I don't think Golden Demon sets an amazing precedent when it comes to competitions with the top 3 format. I don't think it can be very healthy for a lot of people. And I think this new pin level that they've got with the pins for everything is a really great step. As much as I like a hard top 3, I like a competitive format. I enjoy it. Even if I don't win, I don't think that's particularly great for the hobby as a whole. So I think this new pin system is almost like a hybrid open format style for Golden Demon. I think that's really positive. But my point with this is I think I forgot what my point was now.
Well, the broad strokes of essentially how do you judge your own work, your own capabilities against like a field that is increasingly improving.
Oh yeah. So I think there's what I feel, right, and I've said this before. I'm quite emotionally invested in pieces. Is I have different like levels, let's say. So at the moment, I'm painting something because I'm painting it for a tutorial series. This is a work thing. I'm painting it like to a good level, and I'm trying to make some interesting tutorials. So it's almost like quite stale. And then what I have projects where I'm like, I really want to paint Fugan and some fire dragons. That'll be fun. And that'll be good. But then I have like true passion projects, right? Maz was a passion project. My 3 Stormcast Eternals Embattled was a passion project. And those projects always got me the closest to a win or a win. And I do genuinely think there's an element of if you have a passion project, it will be your best work regardless.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily I don't think a passion project needs to be a big conversion. I don't think it needs to be anything crazy elaborate. I don't think it needs to be sculpting, but I do think passion projects truly come through when we look at the GD winners.
Yeah.
And the problem is actually finding a passion project, working through it actually coming together, right? Without going, this just isn't going to work. Because obviously what's in your head is never what's going to come out. I think that's incredibly powerful. And like when it comes to going to competitions, the truth is like there'll be 50 amazing painted models.
Yeah.
Those might be those models that are incredibly painted, but maybe don't have a huge amount of passion in it, or people have just done it. Then you'll see stuff that looks fun. Like people clearly had fun. Right. And then you'll see these projects where it's like someone has put their heart and soul into it. Right. Monstroids is it Monstroids who does the big dioramas?
Yeah.
Right. Such a perfect example of that you can always see there's so much passion into it. Like the wave of squigs that we had in the unit, like that clearly had a lot of passion in it. It had a lot of character. And it's a really cheesy concept to talk about, but I do see that a lot in the top winners. And I think the reason why I'm making this point is because I think people can try too hard. I'm very guilty of this. They can try too hard to win, to paint to win. And the truth is if you find something that like you're proper hyped for, you're going to have more chance of winning than ever.
Do you think that's like a big misstep? Because I mean, it is such an oft repeated thing of like, in the context of Golden Demon, like, oh, what categories? You know, I'm going to go in this category.
I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah, I'm going to game the system. Like, do you think that's just a surefire way to essentially not create the greatest work you can? Or
I think if you're so I do think it's a recipe for not your best work. So I don't have anything that like a project that I'm really excited about at the moment, because I can't finish the ones that I am, and I've got a whole new set in my head, which is a whole different problem. So I've got a couple of pieces. Like I've got an Old World piece. I love Old World, which is pretty safe. Like I've got a Blood Bowl piece that I'm painting. I've got a Necromunda piece that I'm painting. These are just paint jobs, right? Yeah. And the truth is they're going into categories which are not weaker, but let's say have less representation as a general rule. So they're smart choices. But I don't think that should ever really be the logic behind your tactics with this, because the truth is, like, I don't personally believe any of my stuff for Adepticon will be particularly competitive this year, right? And that's not being negative or anything like that. It's because I'm just painting. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm playing the categories. I'm finishing whatever I can finish. And the truth is, someone's going to go to that Necromunda category and they're going to have something which is going to be amazing because they've put so much of themselves into it. Yeah. There's going to be something in Old World where someone's going to have done something ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's one of those things. First of all, we shouldn't judge ourselves by competitions. Competition wins don't mean that you're the best painter there, right? That's a fact. Like, I know it's really harsh, but
no, I've repeated your words that you said to me before MPO many times. Yeah,
and these wins, they fade too. I mean,
so quickly, so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, and it's easy for us to say that when we've won, but you get home and the kids are at your feet, and you're going back to doing all the stuff that you've got to do, and like it's the trophies. They sit on the shelf and they look amazing, but you don't really look at them that much.
No,
and they're forgotten. So competitions are just about meeting up. Like I've said this so many times. Like the point of a competition is you go, you see everyone, you hug your mates that you don't get to see all year round. You laugh as they have emotional breakdowns. Yes, laughing at me a lot.
You watch them sweating as they're moving their piece into the cabinets.
Yeah, absolutely. As all of a sudden their model gets taken out and they start having a panic attack, and you're like, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? That's what it's about. Like the wins are not. It's nice to win. Do you know what I mean? Wins give you validation. Wins help you with your professional. Like,
well, if we didn't care, we wouldn't enter.
Reputation and things like that. But the truth is, they are irrelevant. It's a brutal comment, but it's true.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask this question in the context of that, and I guess in the context of the broader discussion, because it, I said to you in the preamble or on the Discord chat before this, it is a post that continues to stick in my mind, which was on your Patreon after it was the season review, and I guess I was looking at you as someone like, wow, this is a dude who has it figured out, because it's Bronze Masters at MPO. I know, more fool me, bloody hell. But like Bronze Masters at MPO, Gold at Fen, and you had good results at SMC, and then obviously you had that Demon win. So I was like, what a season, incredible,
it was a good season.
Yeah, wow. And then I saw this really long post on the Patreon. I was like, interesting. I'm gonna read this, and you say in that, like, the like ability or the self-reflection that you struggled with confidence, that you were like, actually so many pieces I abandoned because I just felt I couldn't do them, was so fascinating to me. So how the hell do you navigate that journey when I think to most people, because I see these comments across our Discord, across your Discord, across other Discords, like, that dude can paint, no problem. He'll just do whatever. Like, how the hell do you navigate that personally when so many people are like, well, you've got it figured out?
So as context, my season last year, I counted them in the end, and I abandoned 29 projects. Right?
Yeah, we shouldn't be laughing, but
abandoning those projects. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but abandoning those projects were a combination of confidence, and sometimes they just weren't up to scratch. It's fine. These things happen.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, I'm really lucky. Steph pushes me a lot. My wife pushes me a lot. But I just have a few people around where they push me. Like Maz. There was probably 6 points where I was like, Maz is just not going to cut it. Like, it's just not going to cut it. Especially those points where I was like, I've got to hide this, right? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And like this was before you and I, like, us were talking a lot. So like I had Aaron and Liam constantly being like, look, you've got to finish this. This is the piece that's going to get you a win. If anything, like, you have to do it. Yeah. And like the amount of times that they just threatened to slap me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They were just like, and it's the same with like the zombie dragon coming out. Like, I really want to paint the zombie dragon. And I'm like, it's a bit too big. I'm never going to get it done in time. And Aaron's like, you're going to do it, or I'm going to beat the hell out of you. Yeah. So having these people around you is a massive help for that. But ultimately, they're not going to save you completely. And sometimes you've just got to take a step back and be like, is this me sabotaging myself, or is this actually a problem here? Do you know what I mean? Is there actually a problem with this model, or am I just sabotaging myself?
Yeah, but isn't that exactly where these friends or whatever you want to, like, peers or what they are the strongest? When they say, dude, you talked about being finished sculpting before New Year's. You're not done. You need to shelve this, otherwise you bring nothing, right? Yeah. I mean, or say, you've put so much into this. You got to pull through, dude. You have to.
Yeah, and I will say a big like, so I've been I've been social media free for like 6 months now.
Yeah.
And I haven't abandoned any projects. I parked a couple because of time, but I haven't abandoned any because I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
It's like, this just clearly isn't good enough, or
That's
do you know what I mean? Like, it's much more rational. So like, and I'm not missing out because I go onto social media and they don't show me anything that I want to see anyway. I get 5 adverts and I get
you should see my social media.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
Like, some of my best mates in the hobby, I haven't seen any of their posts. Like, the only reason I knew that you'd basically finished the Ogarin was because I think it was Aaron the other day jumped it into our WhatsApp chat, and have you seen this? I was like, no, I didn't even know it got that far with it. Because it doesn't show us any of it. So I'm like, what am I missing?
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't be saying this because I want people to look at our social media, but
yeah, I mean, and they can if they are looking for it specifically, right? If you are interested in some people and you kind of follow up on those people through socials, but these days you kind of have to do it that way because otherwise I scroll probably, so I'm guilty of being a lot on social media.
Yeah, you are,
and I'm also but I'm also. Almost in the opposite camp of you, right? Whereas I don't feel hurt about seeing something that is amazing that I would never like achieve. I don't feel less because I'm bringing something that doesn't look like that. So for me, it's much more like inspiration and following the people that I really like, which means I'm there a lot. But I scroll maybe 2 hours a day or something like that. Some days more, some days, of course, less. But I scroll a lot, and I don't get presented with the things that I would want to if I could curate perfectly for myself. No, not at all. Not even close. Not using hashtags, not using favorites, not using all of it. No, I get all kinds of weird things and what is trendy and what their algorithm wants to show and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so I need to go there specifically.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, Serdar Paints is a perfect example of like someone who I actively go out of my way to follow.
Yes.
And I'm using him as an example at the moment because he's doing this amazing Stormcast Eternal, and seeing his progression is just absolutely wild.
Yes,
and he's the nicest dude.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, it's the perfect example. The only reason that I'm going to see that is because, well, someone's literally linked it to me, and then I'm kind of, it's almost like I'm adding them to a list.
Yes,
that I go and check out every so often because I'm like, I'm excited to see this person's work. And I think it's just a big part of it is like volume, just the sheer volume of insane amounts of work. It just becomes a little bit too much.
You gotta let the dog patter.
I know. I was about to say I'll just put her into bed, but she's all right.
I think that volume conundrum is like, because that's like, if I think about how like the wider world is, there's the people I follow on Instagram who I'm more interested in like their content over ever, but Instagram's its own kind of algorithmic nightmare. But YouTube, it's the people I subscribe to and very few others. Patreon, it's obviously the people I pay money to, and therefore I'm more interested when that content drops. So it's just actually, when you're looking at this deep ocean of so much stuff, all I can do is like curate. And it's like, hey, these, same as I would do for feedback, these are the people I trust to give me feedback. Because if I trusted way too many people, I'm sure they'd all give me valuable stuff, but it's too much. And therefore I just abandon the project.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I'm always a little surprised. And like I say this as someone that is in a Discord where we have an open feedback channel, but I'm always amazed when people put it in because you see like, hey, what do you think? And then it's like, how do you sort through that? How do you begin to process that in the realm of like, how do I improve this? It's really tricky. Yeah.
And I think the thing with feedback is this might come across as very arrogant, and I apologize, but I think
it's okay. I'll snip it for social so you look really bad.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people are not experienced enough to give feedback with full context. And like you see this on the internet as a general whole. People are like, "Oh, can I get some feedback on this?" And the amount of people that put on, "Oh, you need just more contrast, or you need to thin your paints, or your paint should be too thin coats, or skimmed milk, and that sort of stuff." And the problem is, without context, these things don't actually help people. And the better you become, the more you realize the less you know, right? So all of a sudden, when you're trying to give high level feedback to people, it's so important to be like, look, this is a fact, but actually this part of my feedback is an opinion and it can be interpreted in a lot of ways. But a lot of people are not experienced enough to do that. And it's because they don't do it all the time. Do you know what I mean? When you've been teaching for like 3 or 4 years, like we have, it's first of all, you have a one-on-one relationship with that person. You know what their goals are, you know what their drive is, like, you know what they're trying to achieve. And then you can give context to the whole thing as well, not just generic feedback. And when you've got 30 people giving you generic feedback, well, it's too much. It just becomes wildly overwhelming. So I think, like, with feedback, you've got to be very careful about where you get it from and what feedback you take on board.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think there is also kind of like a divide of maybe skill, in the sense that if you are maybe more of a beginner on the journey, like you can paint, but you're starting to seek out feedback, getting some of the generic feedback is pretty good, because these are things that you kind of need to set in stone, because they almost always work. And if you don't have them dialed in, it won't look good. It's just, that's what you call fact, right?
Yes.
And then as people get better and better, well, more and more subjective things get into it. And now you need to be careful who you ask, because the feedback that I would give, the feedback you would give, Aaron would give, Font would give, Richard would give, whoever we can name endlessly, wouldn't be the same. Some of the things would be the same, but at least in all the subjective things, they will vary, and sometimes quite a bit, right?
Yeah. There will
so
be
now,
conflict.
Yeah, of course. And sometimes they can even conflict. Sometimes it can be a matter of, well, I would do this, but dependent on that and that and that, right? And another person would be, because I don't have these things, I would do completely different, right?
Yeah. There's too much of an element of, so you've got two trains of learning. You've got the actual practical side of the learning, which as a general rule at the beginning is hard facts. And then what happens is as you progress through that practical learning, it can diverge a little bit depending on the process in which you want to paint, right? So if you want to go down more the route of stippling, if you want to be more expressive with brushstrokes, that sort of stuff, and that's where it diverges. Yeah. But you also have the theory side of the learning as well, which is what most people neglect very early on. You have the artistic composition, you have creating focal points, you have all of this stuff, and then that side of things very early on there is 100 different routes to go down.
Yes.
And you know what it's like as a teacher is you don't want people to paint like you. You want to, it's almost about challenging them to make the decision themselves, because those decisions they make, that route that they take is a dictation, is going to result in the style that they create in the end. Because that's what style comes from. Like your style comes from the decisions that you make when it comes to the artistic side of painting and how you decide to practically paint.
Yeah.
And I think the truth is like the further these things diverge, right, the more they can start to contradict each other.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And ultimately as well, people understand things differently.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I had a conversation with someone recently and they were talking about, I'm going to put all of these compositional theories into one. Like they want all the lines going one way and then they're going to try and create like multiple focal points in different areas. And I'm like, dude, you've got like 9 different compositional setups in this one piece. It's going to be noisy. It's going to be like really, really confusing. It's going to be really overwhelming. You just simplify it.
Yeah.
And I would never say that person is wrong, but it is a point where we would just be completely at odds in the result that we're going for.
Well, like, and also like in the context of who that person is, like if I was talking to someone that was newer and actually had so few things to focus on, just to see vast swathes of improvement, it's like, this is wonderful that you want to touch all these incredibly creative elements, but what's going to help you the most in terms of if you want to, I don't know, move up in competitions is just this sliver. So don't just simplify it down, and therefore that context of that discussion is so much more important than just here's general feedback. Like push contrast, wonderful, Thanks.
I also think the competition you like, if we're talking about competition specifically, the competition you want to enter is relevant.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean? I don't mean to be funny.
Yeah.
This is a really harsh comment, but composition is like true artistic composition, in my opinion, is less important at Golden Demon than it is to say Monty Sansovino.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree.
Technically clean, neat work is much more important for Golden Demon than it is, let's say, for Monty Sansovino. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. If you took like a super neat but boring piece of MSS, they'd just be like, great, this isn't necessarily what we're here for.
So I think like people need to know what they're aiming for as well.
Yeah.
Because painting like just scales as well, like painting large scale is a completely different animal to painting small scale. Like you if there's no target, if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, you're never going to achieve it.
No. Yeah, I agree.
So I want to ask a question about this in the context of you then, because I think it's easy to talk about like broader strokes. Here's what I'm seeing in the further afield, but I guess you've always struck me as someone that's incredibly cerebral when it comes to like the way that you approach this craft. Could be wrong. Like, what the hell is your process? Because you know, it's interesting speaking to someone like Albert, who's like, every rock is planned.
No.
This composition is down to the millimeter. I know it. So what are you more freeform? Like, how do you approach? Like, you know, Maz is a great example of this. Like, I would look at that as like, wow, how much of this was like foreseen? How much was random? Like, what is your process?
So I cannot visualize things in my head. I had this conversation.
Nervous.
I cannot visualize it at all. So, for example, with Maz, I was like, I love this character. It's like 30 years old. There's some ancient artwork for it. I was like, I want to do this. So all I knew was I was going to put Frog on a Stegodon.
Done.
That was it. So I got the Stegodon box and I went, this is such a bad kit. Like, it was just static. It was so static. And I was like, right. So I've now got to make this more interesting. So I Googled dinosaurs, right? And then I went, oh, that's quite interesting. And I tried to repose it. And then it kind of just comes from there. So I have this idea, like, it's not a secret. I love the model Bastian Carflos. Magnus, you did one. I kind of did one about 80% a few years back. And I love that. I've had this idea for a conversion for him for years, right? But I have this idea, like literally for 3 years now in my head, of a conversion of him holding a banner, right? I have no idea what that conversion looks like.
Yeah.
It's just, I want to do him holding a banner. So when I do it, I'm going to get the model, I'm going to chop it up, and then I'm going to get loads of blue tack and rebuild it.
Yeah.
You probably want to get two models. I'd get two.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it would be two. But yeah, and I'll literally rebuild it with blue tack. And then what happens
that's funny because I've seen some of your photos, right? You share a bit through the progression and whatnot, and you can literally see, okay, so now you've blue tacked something on. You're pretty happy with broader strokes. Then you kind of build something and something else is beginning. Next photo, you've built up top of something that was already built, and then a bit more. And then something, so it kind of forms organically as you go through time, basically. Not something where you just go in, boop, 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 I sculpt this piece, now this corner is done. Not at all. It's like Lego blocks on top of Lego blocks, right?
Yeah. And it's not efficient. Like, I can't stress this enough, but it just stems from the simple fact of I cannot visualize in the slightest.
Yeah.
So I could spend like an hour blue tacking and posing a pair of legs. Do you know what I mean? Like that could be my night.
Is that why you find, like, because you know, you're obviously big heavy into like a sketching approach, and like having watched several of your videos, like how you've shown that sketch to refinement, like, is that also why you need that? Because when it comes to the painting, you can't necessarily visualize elements, you need to see it on the model? Or I mean, the sketching is maybe a poor example because there's other things that sketching is incredibly useful for, but
so sketching for me now, it plays into my mindset. I'm a very chaotic person. I say this all the time, like, I'll be painting for an hour, and then, like, if I have a whole day set aside for painting, I'll paint for an hour and I'll be like, something will pop in my head, I'll go do it, come back and start painting again. And like, I'm a very chaotic person in that regard.
Godless,
so sketching these days leans into that quite a lot. I don't need it so much anymore, and I tend to find that it doesn't look good for social media posts unless I actually plan it. So the main reason why I did sketching at the beginning was because I was so inexperienced, and I was trying to mitigate this. First of all, I was trying to learn composition. So if I front load everything into a sketch, well, everything about the composition, most of what I learn about composition is going to happen in the first 3 or 4 hours. If I abandon that project, I've already learned. So that was really important. And then the other thing is it was just about gathering as much information as possible, because I found that if I had a challenge 30 hours into a paint job and I had to repaint things, because I was quite slow 4 or 5 years ago, it was a massive step back. And I was also just starting out, like making videos and that sort of stuff. And I was really worried about wasting time. So I did the sketch because it was just about gathering all of the information and all of the problems, all of the challenges, everything that I was going to mess up. It was going to happen very early on. And I just learned, like, it was such a massive learning opportunity for me. And it's why I kind of push people. I don't enforce it, but I do push students to sketch first, because what you're effectively doing is you're doing 80%, you're doing 20% of the work, let's say, but you're getting 80% of the information. You're going to have 80% of your potential failures, 80% of your learning. It's all front loaded. So even if for whatever reason you do abandon that project later on, you've learned the most you can from it. And
don't you find, like, now you've done the 20%, and that's where you had your learning and you made your compositional choices, color, lighting, whatnot. Now you have 80% of work to do that is, quite frankly, boring.
yes.
I mean, how to go, because for me, I had to not do it this way. Otherwise, I would never get there. I would never. In the end, right, you have to paint that freaking foot. And now you're doing it because everything else is perfect and pristine. So now you paint that boring ass boot.
Dude,
right?
29 failed projects.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah. I mean, completely agreeing with you. It becomes a chore towards the end. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. There's nothing that I can say that's going to contradict you. No. It's so true. It becomes a bit of a chore at the end, but I do find every project does anyway. Because I've got to paint this leather belt now, and I've got to paint it standard as the rest of it, or I've got to paint this stupid feather on this hat.
Yeah.
Right.
And it has to be really good, because otherwise it sticks out, and I've done so much good work already.
Genuinely, I was painting black trousers yesterday. I spent 4 hours painting black trousers, and by the end of it, I was like, this is being covered by a pink feather. Why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm like, I'm not going to turn this into a tutorial because it's stupid.
No, that's another thing I actually wanted to ask you about. How do you find doing these? Because I thought when we started, Bruce and I, that I was going to paint tutorial things and keep that separate. Have competition things, keep them separate. Yeah. Boom. A year later, no. They are absolutely mixed, because otherwise I don't have the time. Yeah. How do you balance? How do you, like, and especially all the things that you can't, I mean, having a tutorial on black pants all around, and it's maybe in totality, it's a 12-hour paint job. No one's going to sit through that, right?
No.
So how do you balance? What do you do?
It's such a hard trade-off. It really is such a hard trade-off, because first of all, you've got to get the video to the point where it's short enough that people are going to stay interested, but long enough to have the content that you want in it. That's incredibly difficult. And then sometimes the subject is just not interesting, right? Like that's the truth of it. But there's also fillers, right? So for example, I've got a Lord Relictor on my desk at the moment. I love Stormcast Eternals, but he's got an hourglass on his waist. Well, the truth is that's not a hard thing to paint, or at least I know how to paint it. I've done quite a few of them. Well, actually, that's a very easy video to make. So sometimes it's about picking out, at least in my experience, it's about picking out the things that you can really maximize on and make nice, good content without it taking you 50 hours because you've just painted a non-metal metallic breastplate. But it really is. It's an incredibly difficult balance, because it's also about what are people going to view. Do you know what I mean? And what do people want to view? And it's also, it's not even just that. It's also about what are new people going to want to see, right? Because if I go, I'm going to paint some black trousers, no one's viewing that online and going, I'm going to sign up to a Patreon video for that, or I'm going to go check out the YouTube channel for that. Whereas if I paint a non-met breastplate or a shiny Space Marine, well, that's a lot more work. Yeah. But people are going to, let's say, convert, right? They're going to move from Instagram and they're going to go and check out the YouTube video or something like that. It's a really hard trade-off. And to be fair, like, I'm not the best person to ask, because like we were talking about this beforehand, I've spent 5 years doing this now, but those 5 years I've desperately been trying to do non-GW stuff. Like so many people I talk to are like, oh, I'd love to see more stuff on busts and large scale and that sort of stuff. And I've been trying to do that for 5 years now. And the truth is it doesn't get enough traction.
Yeah. No, the conversion is too low.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reality is I'm now at this point where unfortunately I'm like, well, I have to paint Games Workshop. Like maybe in 5 years time, if I'm big enough, I can go back to doing some large scale stuff, but I've got to, I don't know, kiss a few frogs. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not to say that I don't like Games Workshop. I grew up in Games Workshop. I love Games Workshop. It's just there is lots to this hobby that I think we should celebrate. But unfortunately, it doesn't get the views.
Because aspects are that niche within a niche within a niche within a niche, and I think it's something that we struggle with a little bit in terms of like the one thing we can never offer is this idea of speed, and it's the one thing that is like most searched. Is the reason why the Slapshot video is nearly 1 million views is because it's fast, and it's just like hey, I want you to be in this hobby because I think this is a display painting hobby. It's incredible. I can't offer you speed, and in a very kind of like instant gratification world, that's so brutal in a content perspective. Because I can't lie to people. I got easy NMM in 5 steps.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, kind of, but not really.
It's really interesting as well, because I think you need to pick a lane. Like my experience as well, you really need. So I've done, apologies, Scarlett, come lay down, my darling.
No, the dog can move.
Rose is just like, not the dog.
The poor dog.
She's all right. She's just like,
we're pro dog here.
She's trying to find a bed to settle in. There's literally 7 beds in this house for the dog, right?
Good.
The problem is she's short. She like, anyway. So I think the problem is like, you've got to pick a lane. Like if I do a video which is genuinely like putting out some tips about painting, like display painting, or like here's a high quality tutorial on how to paint pink, like I did on the Blood Bowl piece, like that sort of stuff does like quite well for me. But because I don't normally do tabletop miniatures, like I recently put out a Fire Dragon, like here's how to paint a Fire Dragon, like zero, like very little skill. But and the truth is it tanked, and that's not because it wasn't a good video or anything like that. It's because that's not what I normally cater to. So I do think that's a big part of like, you need to pick what you're going to do and you need to lay into it. Well, the problem is if you're going to go, I'm going to try and do content that genuinely helps people paint. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't genuinely want to learn how to paint. They want to know how to paint a Fire Dragon, right? And that content, like where you're genuinely trying to teach people to paint, it's not quick content to make. No. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there's a lot of painting, and I've kind of got to the point where I'm like, well, do you know what? I'm not going to paint a full miniature. I don't need to paint a full miniature. Like actually, some miniatures look really good with a big bright color, and then everything else blacked out, and that makes a good thumbnail.
Yeah, we actually try to paint full, like at least so much so that you can fill out all elements, right? But that means some of the tutorials will be a bit boring, right? Because that element, you need to still paint it, right? And maybe you don't paint all of the feathers in that one video, of course not. You show some of the feathers, but it might not be the most exciting video to watch. But if you want to finish this model to whatever we present, well, it's part of something that you have to paint on it, right?
Well, and that's why I'm like very pro Patreon at the end of the day, because it's like, or whatever, subscription services, like let's just say for like the sake of argument, because you have people bought into that, and it's like, in the context of YouTube, 1 million people aren't interested in this video, but 100 people are interested to the point that they're willing to pay, or maybe 50 people are interested to the point, like you have that video on your Patreon, Liam, with the like, here's different blending techniques explained. It's 90 minutes. It's really long.
Yeah.
And like, I think that was when I signed up to your page. That was like when I was newbie. I was like, that's the first thing I was like, finally I understand it. I'm so like, I've got my money's worth right in this video. And it's like, I would never find that on YouTube because that video would tank. No one would do that video. It would need to be 5 minutes and not tell you anything.
Yeah.
I think there's a, when it comes to, like, I worked in sales for quite a long time. And the truth is, like, one of the biggest things that I learned was people by people. Now, I'm a hypocrite. I'm a complete hypocrite in what I'm about to say. But you should be putting your face on things. And the reason why we should be putting our face on things is because people want to see you and you want to you want them to buy into you. Now, I hate that idea. I don't like putting my face all over things. Just like I want to make tutorials and hopefully I can help some people. But the reality is people buy people. And I think there's a big element of actually, if you're going to do playlists and you're going to try and really make content that helps, at least what I'm finding at the moment, YouTube is doing quite well for me at the moment comparatively, which I'm really grateful for. I think it's just what seems to work is actually maybe some of the more exciting videos for a project go on YouTube, and then the more clunky things or the less exciting things go on Patreon or go in the members area, right? Because you don't necessarily need to sell to those people who have already signed up because they're already invested in you, which obviously we're incredibly grateful for. And to be honest, like, this is an outside perspective. I think it's why you guys are successful, because one of the hardest things that you can create in this hobby is a genuine community, because it's so much work. And I've never been able to invest that much time in it. And when you look at probably the big strength of what you guys have, it is your community. That's not to say your content's not good or anything like that, but you have this amazingly strong, active community, which is large.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's really huge.
I agree completely, and I think you kind of hit the head right on the nail, because you say, well, people buy into people, which means if you like that person, like their style, you are also more willing to listen to what they say. You are more willing to watch through that video that is maybe not the most exciting, but it has some things going on that are actually really important, right? And if they know, well, Liam knows his stuff, for example, right? You might be more inclined to okay, well, he said, watch this one because it actually explains this issue you're having. I'll better sit down and watch it, right? So that is kind of how you sell these maybe less exciting videos or things or concepts. Sometimes it's during teaching, sometimes it's during tuition, sometimes it's during like videos or whatever it is, right? Yeah. So I agree completely. Yeah.
And it is a huge amount of work, and that's the problem with the communities things. Is it requires, like, Magnus can have a day of painting, and I'll be a day kind of managing the community, because if you don't, then it becomes a cesspool and all the kind of like unfortunate things that people do.
That's the thing, is the bigger it gets, the more of a monster it becomes, right? And I can say this because I know a lot of people in your community, right? Yeah. And all they're going to do is they're going to tell me off. But the bigger the community gets, the more of a monster it becomes. Like, the more of this just giant ship that you've got to try and steer in a direction that you're happy to, like, almost represent. And the truth is, like, you do get bad apples that sometimes you've got to, like, you've got to, let's say, trim the bush a little bit. Sure. There's a lot of different analogies here, do you know what I mean? But
Liam is pro trimming bush.
Damn, these snippets are gonna be great.
No, I can't wait.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is, it's a lot of work.
It is.
Do you know what I mean? It is, trimming the bush is a lot of work.
Trimming the bush is a lot of work, and it's painful, unfortunately. But also, like, there's a community aspect, which is also like listening to people, which is like something we did today when people were like, "Hey, this is getting a bit out of hand. We need to redress it because newbies would hate this." Okay, let's redress it. Let's not get prideful about the approach. Let's just actually build a welcoming place. I want to touch back on the teaching thing, because I think it's something that we've asked all the guests so far, which is like, you are a teacher, you have a lot of students, you do that one-to-one tuition, you also talk to a lot of people. I think one of my most common sights is seeing you at any of these competitions, and you've got some random person and you are lecturing them on the kind of joys or theories or something. Is there for you like a most common, not necessarily misstep, but if you could like say to most people, like, this is the most repeated thing? For Albert, it was color, which I found really interesting. Like, it's the color selection. What is it that you find?
So I think the reason why this question is so interesting is because people tend to gravitate towards different teachers for different reasons. So what you'll get is some people will go to a certain person because they really want to learn how to blend. And that person will be incredible at teaching blending. Now, the reason why this is relevant for me is because genuinely 90% of the students that come to me are at a point where they are a good painter. And then they go, I just can't seem to make it look exciting. Like, it doesn't get enough views. Like, it doesn't look as good as this other name or whatever it is. And the truth is, so what tends to happen in my experience with a lot of people, and I said this earlier, is they focus on the technical side of painting. They want like this clean, crisp, smooth paint job, right? And then they achieve it. And then they go, well, my work's not making a splash. And the biggest thing that I tend to find is people focus so much on this technical aspect of painting that they completely neglect the compositional side of things. And one of like the way that I do my teaching is as soon as someone comes to me, as they sign up for the tuition, we do an intro call, we find out what the priorities are, what the goals are, and then we pick a direction. And I always work on one or two things at once. It's always the things that are going to have the biggest impact. And then as they get through that, we do one or two more new things. And basically these things become smaller and smaller. But 90% of the time, the thing that I work on first is global value contrast over local value contrast. Because people, and when we're talking about value contrast, we're talking about contrast in light and dark. It's the most important type of contrast that we deal with, right? It's the biggest one. So people go, oh, I've got loads of contrast in this. And they go from light to dark on everything.
Yeah.
And that looks good. But if you want to control your composition, you need to go from light to dark across the whole piece as well. And this is what a lot of people like. It's quite hard to explain. And it's very hard for people to kind of comprehend and actually start to action. So it normally takes like 6 months or so for people to start seeing progress. But it's this idea of controlling your value range globally across the whole piece to enforce different focal points. And this is just the sort of stuff that we're not taught. Most people go through Games Workshop to start. Nothing wrong with that. So they teach you how to paint, but they don't teach you how to, I don't know, art.
Put on lighting.
How to art, yeah.
So that's genuinely where I start with most of my students.
Yeah.
It's like, globalized contrast as opposed to localized, or globalized light as opposed to localized light, however you want to put it. However you want to explain it.
I'm thinking that is probably why I think the thing that I see people struggle the most with is hairs and furs and these softer things, because they completely forget that this has texture, but it still needs global lighting. So you can't just edge highlight everything. You can't just have a dark shadow and a bright edge highlight on everything, because it won't look soft anymore, right?
But because it's still one big shape.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite piece, Liam? I got to ask. It's been very interesting talking to some people. Like, actually, one piece is finished, I hate it. And we were talking about this in our Discord the other day. Like, do you get your models out of the cabinet to look at?
No.
Like, is it
so
once it's done, it's done?
There's three pieces that I love. So I did a Odin the Barbarian, which was from Limbo Miniatures, 75 mil, a long time ago.
Remember that tutorial series?
Yes, it was probably one of my first successes, and I absolutely loved that piece. And I was quite early on in my career, and someone asked to buy it. Big Deno asked to buy it, and he gave me a good price, and I was like, okay, like I'm getting to sell a 75 mil piece. This was like, it was a big deal for me. The truth is, I regretted it massively.
Oh,
like,
really?
Really, it's my biggest regret. Now, interestingly, if I had waited 6 months, I would never have regretted selling it, because so in Battled, my 3 Stormcast Eternals with the backdrop, so much wrong with that, but I still love it. is one of my favorite pieces, top 3.
So much right with it too, though.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what we're like, though? We focus on negative, and we shouldn't.
Yeah.
So, but that's being sold. That's going to Verco's vault, right?
Oh, nice.
Really, really happy with that. But the truth is, I don't regret that because I've had it here for long enough. So it's a time thing. Do you know what I mean? And now I've got Maz. Like I've point blank turned around and said I will not sell Maz. It's my favorite thing that I've ever done. It's an iconic character I grew up with. Like I love it. But I guarantee you 6 months down the line, if someone offered me money for it, it'd be gone. Like if someone offered me money for it now, if someone offered to buy it off me, I'd be like, I won't let it go for any less than 10 grand. That's a stupid number, but I don't want to sell it. No. But if someone offered me £2,000 for it in 6 months, I'd probably be like, yeah, go for it. Not bothered.
Yeah.
So I'm not particularly precious about these things.
You've really kind of shot yourself in the foot with your negotiating position being public.
Yeah. Now you won't get 10. Dang,
dude. The thing is, like,
we can clip it. We can clip it. So he says,
I'll just overdub.
If you say 8.
Exactly. Absolutely. I think it's one of those things where, like, when 5 years ago I needed the money. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was very much like I was earning like £50 a month 5 years ago. Like, selling a piece was such a big deal. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm in no way rich or anything like that. Like, I do okay.
Yeah, but you don't have to sell.
Yeah, exactly. I can't. I don't have to sell.
No.
But
it's funny that you mention it because I've been asked why. Because I have sold Bastion, right?
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
No, I'll deliver it at Adepticon.
Right. Okay. Cool.
And it's
hand delivered, no less. I mean, what's
is that going to Verco's or a customer?
No, a customer.
A customer. Very cool.
And it's one of those things where people ask, how can you sell it, right? Well, how can you? Well, I mean, if someone wants to pay a fair price to be able to enjoy a thing I created, that I am not really that. I mean, I had it. It did the thing for me. I've looked at it a lot. I've had it on display at my local game store, and now I'm okay with letting it go. Yeah. Right after a trophy or right before, whatever, you might be less inclined. But these days I'm thinking more, well, I mean, I've enjoyed it. People have enjoyed it. It did all the things it was supposed to. If someone really wants to own it, I'm okay with that, right?
This is the thing that's really interesting. Like, first of all, the joy comes from, like, so cheesy, but the joy comes from the journey of creating it. Yes. Right? That's the fact. Yeah. Eventually you stop looking at these things, right? Yeah. I've got a couple of pieces on my shelf that are like 6 years old now. I never look at them, but I like every so often I look at them and go, that's what I did back then, and it's awful. Right? It's one of those things where the novelty wears off. It's the same as a competition win. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
I won my first demon. I'm over the moon. You yourself exactly the same. But actually, how often do you look at that trophy?
Never.
Do you know what I mean? The only reason I looked at that trophy is because it fell off the shelf the other day.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I mean?
So you boys in storing your goddamn golden demons.
Yeah. No, but it's true, right? It's true.
Other people may as well enjoy these things.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, but that's like almost like the third party eyes, I guess I'd say. Like, if you are the creator of the work, you're gonna view it innately differently than there are pieces for whom, like, people talk about in like reverent terms, like this is the iconic piece, and like like for me it'd be something like Rich's Mortarion, like, and like I know he probably doesn't care about it in any way, shape, or form.
I guarantee that's got an inch of dust over it somewhere in his office.
Yeah.
I'll bet money on it.
Verco should buy it then. Huh?
Well, I mean that's why it's maybe this is prescient because Squidmar has his video on the vault and who that dude is and the sheer scale of that collection. But hey, if there's a dude out there with a lot of money who is ultimately going to fund artists, it's not a bad thing.
No, and create a space where people can come and actually look at it. I mean, when it's standing in my living room, not anybody can come and look at it. I mean, if you ask nicely, I would probably invite you, but...
Oh, phew.
I wouldn't.
But
Noted.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of also providing something for others. I actually think it's a really lovely thing. And of course, I understand being attached to your creations. So you should not sell something that you are uncomfortable with. But even though I can have a favorite piece that isn't in my home anymore. I mean, why couldn't I?
Well, it's still yours.
You've always got the pictures.
You have the pictures, yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting subject.
It's a bit somber, actually. I was expecting this to be bang, bang, but no. I think people's relationship to their work can be quite somber. It is interesting.
And to be fair, I know plenty of people who will never part with their work.
Yeah.
And I don't judge them. I just don't have that attachment to it.
People with a lot of storage. That's generally how I feel. Right, I'm mindful of time. Critical question. We have Adepticon in less than 26 days. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about that, Liam? As your project's going?
So I've had I am not feeling great. So I'm proper excited about Adepticon. I'm really looking forward to meeting everyone, and I'm really looking forward to the classes. Like, that's what I'm really buzzing about. The truth is, I've made a lot of mistakes when it comes to pieces for Adepticon. So I came back from Germany and being like, I've got these wicked ideas. I want to do another monster. Yeah. And basically I reposed this one of the Age of Sigmar monsters, and it's sat next to me and I love it. And I'm like,
I do too.
I'm not even halfway through though. Like, it was 3 months out from Adepticon. I was like, I'm not even halfway through. Like, this is just not happening. Like, yeah. And then I'm scrambling going, well, I don't actually know what I want to paint now. And just like a combination of work commissions, because we've relaunched the commission service, like the army side of it, which Steph is managing. So that's kept me kind of busy as well, which has been really great. But it just means that I haven't had a huge amount of time to really invest. And it's one of those things. Like I said, like I got a couple of cool projects that I'm finishing, but they're not passion projects. So I don't expect to go to Adepticon and win. And do you know what's really fun, right? That being in that situation is quite freeing. So Magnus, like, I don't know if you're gonna actually be able to relate to this because you won at your first Goblin Demon, but
bastard.
Yeah, but I'm going to the second one with no expectations either.
Yeah,
I mean,
but there's something to be said for going to a show, or like going to a show with no expectation to winning, like. You know you're kind of not in the run-in, or go into a show and being knocked out early, because what happens is it means like that day you're just basically a cheerleader for your mates. Yeah. And there's no stress, there's no pressure, there's no emotion other than we want our friends to win. Yeah. And do you know what? Honestly, sometimes those are the best events, and you never know. I might come away with a demon, like, for whatever reason. The category might be light on entries in Blood Bowl and that sort of stuff.
And your piece will look really good, dude.
Yeah, it will look nice. It's bright hot pink, which is not like me at all. But it's one of those things where it's really quite freeing to be going like, I'm going to Adepticon. I'm probably not really in the running, which means I'm just playing cheerleader for all of my mates, and that's such a nice weekend.
Yeah, and you're seeing it through their eyes as well. Like, that's how you get to experience it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I wanted to say it before, actually, when we talked about the wins, that they kind of fade quickly, but a way to make them, I guess, even more is the shared wins. I believe it fully, even if they are my own or other people. The shared wins, they matter so much more. I think I've said it on stream before that I came from Magic, and I had a friend actually win a tournament. Yeah. It was the best tournament we ever played, and I did poorly.
Yep.
But it was the best one, right? Because you get to see others succeed too, and that matters for you also.
Yep. There's so many different types of. So the big three for me, right, is obviously it's a big deal when you win. That's an amazing weekend. It's an emotional roller coaster. Great. Yeah. There's also then there's the complete opposite, where you're just not in the running. You get to go cheer on your mates. It's a wicked weekend. No stress. The worst you've got to do is console your mates and make sure that they behave well when they lose, right? Yeah. Because we all have emotions. Do you know what I mean? We all get upset. It's all good. Yes. But then the other one is like, and this is probably my favorite, is when you're in the running in the same category with your mates, right? Because that's the one where all of a sudden there's light-hearted banter. You're winding each other up. Then one of you wins. You get to you get to wind the other person up because they're a loser. They're not, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's so many different ways that the weekends can go, and like you just got to be able to enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and as long as again, it sounds cheesy, but as long as your behavior never brings down others, you're doing fine. Do you know what I mean? And that's not to say that you can't get upset. Like I know there was some drama about a YouTube video about someone who didn't win, right? But you're allowed to be upset. You're emotionally invested into these things. But if you are going to bring down other people, like you've just got to be able to remove yourself while you kind of manage that stuff. Do you know what I mean?
We are going a couple from the community, and one of the things that I have asked is, I would like to know what would make you upset, what would make you happy, and what would make you over the moon, right? Because now,
you ask me this.
We're not
you don't
there
count.
yet.
Yeah.
But the people, but I have asked because it's something where you kind of get to level expectations. No one has to put into words, well, I fell short. But you know that they felt short. So you can kind of pick people up automatically a bit. And you would also know this is insane. This is incredible. This is something that I want to cheer even more, right? So I think leveling expectations and knowing what would maybe upset people, because everyone is saying, well, it doesn't matter too much, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, of course it matters. Of course it does.
Underneath, there's emotions bubbling. People want results.
They
want to achieve. I think it's important to remind people of what the achievements are actually worth. So we're talking about Golden Demon specifically here. Like, I know they've changed it. I can't remember what they changed it to, but like getting a pin is a big deal, right? It may not be a big deal to me because I'm aiming for higher than that, but it's still a big deal. Getting commended is a huge deal. Getting commended is a win as far as I'm concerned. Now, the truth is
getting a finalist.
Now it's
they're switched.
So now it's perfectly acceptable for that not to be the same for everyone.
Yes.
Like getting a finalist, like I'm trophy hunting, right? That's what I want, is I want a trophy. That's not to say that detracts from anyone else getting a finalist or a commended or whatever it is. These are still very big deals.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think it's quite easy for people to think, oh, it's a trophy or nothing, because you have the likes of me who is trophy hunting, or yourself, you've got a trophy already, you want another trophy. Do you know what I mean? But the truth is, any of these results are incredibly really, really incredible achievements. And sometimes we have to remind people of that over the weekend, because they're like, if I don't get a trophy, it's not worth it. And it's like, actually, do you know what I mean? There's 400
and look at what you lost out to. They are great things too. I mean, you were in the mix with these people. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And there's an element that I think community helps with this, and it's only something that happens over time. Like, so a lot of us that went to Spiel last year are going to Spiel this year. And whereas year one was maybe like, oh, I have no expectations, or I don't want to say what I kind of want because that feels like maybe I'm expecting it. And I don't want to put that weight on. Like, we know people now. And so coming back to Spiel, it's like, no, I'm shooting for this. And I'm going to say it now. And if I don't hit it, I'm going to feel bad, but then you all can lift me up. Yeah. That, once you're comfortable with people, then you can say that. That's a big game changer in terms of how you can act as a group on site as well, like in events, because it's like, this person got it, brilliant. Oh, that's I'm going to cheer just as loud as if they got a demon, because I know to them that's the damn same thing. Whereas, this person was actually shooting for higher. They still got a really good award. They could have both won the same award. We're going to treat those people very differently because of that mentality. And that's okay. I don't ask people to apologize for the things they want, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
No.
I think like it's really important to remember though, like with competitions, especially Golden Demon, that at the end of the day, just because you win or lose doesn't make yours the best. It makes yours the one the judge like the most. There's so much subjectivity to it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And if for whatever reason you don't place, that doesn't mean that you didn't deserve something.
Yeah.
Because people get so disheartened. Because there's more losers than there are winners at Golden Demon.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot
at most competitions, actually.
Yeah. It's just GD's relevant, but yeah, this is exactly it.
Okay. Well, mindful of time, I think it's time to wrap up. I mean, my big takeaway from this is actually that the surefire way to get Liam to finish a project is threats of physical violence.
Yes.
Number one core takeaway.
If you don't finish it, I'm going to kill you. That's what I get all the
wonderful.
time.
Good.
I've just ruined your algorithm, by the way. No one's going to
for
find
the death threats.
now.
Yeah, so when you see Liam, be sure to give him a death threat. Liam, what do you got to? I know I did at the start. Where should people go find you and check out your wonderfulness, your wonderful self?
Honestly, if people want to support, I obviously monetary support is huge, but the reality is, I'm really trying to build YouTube at the moment. I want to create a hub of free content for people to genuinely learn from. It's still in its infancy because I've really got narrowed and focused down on what it is. But honestly, if you want to check my stuff out, check YouTube out. And then if you like how I teach or how I explain things, feel free to check out the rest of it.
Yeah, you're Phoenix Miniature Art on YouTube.
I am.
4193. Get those numbers in at the end.
It's so annoying. It's like, how many Phoenix miniature arts are there really? You search it on Google.
Turns out, Phoenix, a very popular symbol from mythology.
So, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, in all seriousness, I appreciate all the support, but I love teaching. YouTube is completely free. Just go check it out. If you like it, then have a look at everything else.
Awesome. Well, and we thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom and your views. And
cheers for having me.
Looking forward to seeing you in, 25 days there.
Don't say the days.
Okay. Look forward to seeing you at Adepticon, which is an event that is happening
at some point in the future. Yeah.
And if you've been watching this, thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, however you've engaged. And until next time, paint something beautiful. Goodbye.